G'day. How are ya? You battler? Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Steve, who I both have a hit with every so often, but have also treated as a patient for I think 8 or 9 years now. He's a nice player, a little unorthodox with a double-hander both sides, but it's pretty cool playing people like this because it's just different. The ball comes through differently, and he's really good to hit with because he's pretty consistent and just keeps the ball in, unlike me who makes a lot of mistakes. So for those of you who have seen other footage of me playing tennis, you might know that I used to be a right-hander and I've switched to playing as a lefty. I think would have been around September 2019. This is due to a right shoulder labral tear, which I don't really know how it happened. I think it was multifactorial, like many injuries. A combination of years of playing tennis, my work as a chiropractor, adjusting people and manoeuvring people on the bench, and probably pushing weights in the gym. Combine that, do it lots, and you end up with a busted shoulder. Fortunately, I have 2 arms, so I'm very grateful that I can continue to play the game that I've loved since the age of 6. When I was little, my dad worked for a company. They transferred him to South Africa, so we followed, and I ended up spending most of my years growing up in Durban. And my first tennis coach was a guy called Peter Waters, and I had my very first lesson with him at Glen Ashley Tennis Club, and I have the fondest of memories of Peter. And if anybody watching this is from South Africa or knows of Peter Waters, please comment below and tell me about your experiences with him. To my knowledge, he's still around today. He's probably, he'd have to be in his 70s, I think. But just, for me, just a brilliant coach. He gave me such a great foundation, I think. I've always been passionate about tennis, and I mean that. I am passionate about it. I always come back to my tennis. I've loved it since the age of 6, and I'll continue to play it for as long as I can. When I first started, my dad took me down to the courts in Glen Ashley, and I remember Peter saying to my dad, "So what hand does he play with?" And my dad shook his head. To this day, I don't know why my dad didn't just say, "Well, he writes left-handed, so he's probably a lefty." But Peter said, "Look, don't worry about it. There's always a way of telling." So he dragged me out onto the court and he says, "Here, Tom, throw a ball with your right hand." So I threw it as far as I could over the net. He says, "Okay, now I want you to do it with your left." And I did so as well, and apparently I threw them roughly the same distance. And Peter said, "Oh, haven't seen that before. I'll just start you as a righty." And that's my only gripe with Peter to this day is, "Mate, why didn't you start me as a lefty?" Like, if I had been able to serve the way that I could with my right hand before my injury, I reckon I would have gone a lot further in my career, just simply because, there aren't as many lefties around, and I think I would have been just that little bit more dangerous, maybe notched up a few more wins. Anyway, I'm starting my tennis career a little late, my left-handed tennis career a little late, in my 40s, but as you can see here, it's not too shabby. I gotta say, it probably looks better than the way it feels. And again, if anybody's got some tips, I am always open to constructive criticism. I know it's not perfect. I know I'm getting older and I'm slow, but any sort of help that you guys can offer or observations that you make, please let me know. I tend to start my hitting practices by doing, just up and down the middle of the court, but then as soon as we're warmed up, I suggest that we do some cross courts. And the way I try to hit cross court is by starting roughly in the middle of the court, feeding the ball, which then forces me to run out to the left or to the right, depending on whether we're doing forehands or backhands, and then forcing myself to recover. So you're hitting that forehand, and then I try to sort of recover to the middle. Every now and then I'll come in and try and play some volleys. Yeah, you see me moving out to the left, hitting, trying to recover back to the centre, and then stepping out. It was pretty hot this particular day. You can see the cloud cover there. It was extremely humid that day, so it was pretty tough trying to move around on court. We were just both getting tired much earlier than we would normally. So in case you're wondering, I'm using my Pete Sampras racket, the Wilson Pro Staff 6.0 85 square inch head. It's pretty tiny, but I've always loved this racket. It just feels really good swinging through the air. It is a difficult stick to play with though, because it's got a small sweet spot, and unless you hit it right where you're meant to, it's not going to feel so good. So I decided to hit with this racket that day, just to force me to keep my eye on the ball. There has been a lot of editing done on this footage as well, so what you're seeing is most of the good shots. There were plenty of shanks during this hitting session. My UTR at the time of recording this footage is just under 6. I think it's around 5.83 or something. I really don't know what my UTR was as a right-hander at the best part of my career. I'm pretty certain it would have been above 8, possibly around 10. 5.83 is obviously something I'm not very proud of. I didn't get much of a chance to hit during the week, unfortunately. At best, I can do it twice a week, every second week. On average, only once a week can I play. And that's probably the best excuse I have for losing some of the matches I lose when I play my Tuesday night comp, but I still find myself getting incredibly frustrated losing sets. Coming from quite a high standard as a right-hander, and then playing down a number of grades despite using a different hand, a non-dominant hand. It's still just really difficult. Anybody who's played tennis for many years knows how frustrating this sport can be. Imagine trying to play with your non-dominant hand with the expectations you have with your dominant hand. It's a curse, but also a blessing, right? Because at least I can play. Some people aren't so fortunate. I do enjoy the challenge of trying to play with my non-dominant hand. It's not that non-dominant, by the way. I am actually a lefty by nature. I throw left-handed, I write left-handed. I just, for reasons before, never started left-handed. So, it's very difficult to get your head around the footwork, particularly the serve, when you start playing with your non-dominant hand. But I'm up for the challenge, and I'm going to keep playing. I can still hit right-handed. I'm pretty rusty now because it's been probably a couple of years since I had a proper hit with the right hand. It's just a little bit painful on the shoulder when I try and rip the ball, mostly on the forehand actually. And certainly if I catch the ball late on a right-handed backhand, that can be painful too. And as for serving, that's just completely out of the question. If you've got a labral tear, one of the things you'll notice is throwing becomes almost impossible. Your arm just turns limp. It's that the speed of throwing your arm into external and then internal rotation, which a labral tear just cannot handle. I'm going to start doing some serving now, and in just a moment you're going to see a guy just on the left of your screen smash a ball onto my court, and here it is, boom. I just like watching myself react kind of stupidly to that. Anyway, so the serve is easily the hardest part of playing with your non-dominant arm. And again, anybody watching this, if you've got any tips for me, send them across. It's so hard trying to serve with your other arm. I always feel like a complete idiot serving. Doesn't look so bad here. I don't like the little sort of pause in my swing. I seem to sort of change direction right when my hand is there. Sort of pauses and change direction. I want to make that swing phase a bit more fluid with no breaks in between. Keep the momentum up and perhaps add a bit of pace to the serve. Anyway, as some of you know, I'm a chiropractor and I treat a lot of shoulder injuries, also a lot of tennis players with shoulder injuries. And the labral tear it's a common injury. It's not one that I see as often. Really all that you can do for a labral tear is just strengthen the muscles around it. It sounds cliche, but it is very important. You can get surgery on a labral tear, but from what I gather, it's not that successful. So if you're somewhat functional, you may as well sort of avoid surgery and just focus on exercising within your limits. The shoulder joint is ball and socket joint, and it's quite a shallow socket because our upper limbs need to be quite flexible so that we can bring food to our mouths and reach behind our back and do all those sort of things, as opposed to the hip joint, which is a much deeper ball and socket joint because it has its function embedded in stability. We need to walk on them. They can't be too loose, otherwise they'll come out and we'll fall over. So what the labrum does is it effectively deepens the socket. So it's like a calamari ring of ligament which attaches to the circumference of the socket part of the shoulder, known as the glenoid cavity. And when you tear the labrum, it's a tear that occurs in that calamari-like ring structure. It's usually like a longitudinal tear, like an oval shape, and it just makes internal and external rotation, in other words throwing movements, painful, and in some cases not even achievable. So I still go to the gym and I lift weights. I can't go quite as heavy as I once used to. You've got to be very careful of shear stress. So for example, when you're bench pressing, you don't want to bring the eccentric phase of the movement too far down. You might have heard some people saying bench press to the floor. So you might lie on the floor on your back and do a bench press, and because you're on the floor, your elbows can only go so far back behind you, level with your torso basically. I do bench press on the bench, and I do let my arms travel a little bit behind my body. I just make sure that I'm extra careful and I'm really activating those muscles so as not to cause further damage. Traction is really good for labral tears. That is a pulling apart force. So hanging on one arm, I usually keep my feet on the floor and reach up to a bar and just sort of let my weight drop, just to get some pulling, sort of traction sensation that gaps the joint and allows any build-up of inflammation to flow out of the joint. Cortisone can help if it's ultrasound guided. It gets right into the spot. It'll decrease inflammation, but it won't fix anything. It's just pain relief, really. There is some specific exercise work you can do for improving the neurology associated with all the shoulder muscles. I won't go into detail with that, but if you're seeking that information, again, drop a comment and perhaps I can email you, or if you're in the country, you can give us a call. I'm happy to talk through your issue, because no labral tear is the same. They're all a little different. So back to the tennis. I need all the help I can get with my serve. I just got to practice more and more. So what I did with Steve here was just a whole bunch of serves in a row from one side, and now you see us serving to the right-handed backhander. I don't even know what hand Steve is, he's lefty or righty, it doesn't really matter, he's double-handed both sides, so just serve it wherever he can't get to it, I guess. Yeah, we just sort of played the points out here, and I've actually cut out a lot of faults because there were lots and lots of faults, and yeah, some rubbish forehands like that one you just saw as well, and that one. I quite liked my slice, that's pretty good. My backhand is fairly solid, and I do like my forehand too. It's just I've got to get a bit more feeling within the fingertips, and not sort of tighten up and stiffen up in the forearm when I'm playing matches. Tennis is so hard, isn't it? You know, you can jump on court and hit with a practice partner and feel like you're killing it. Then you go and play a match, and it's as if you've never played at all, or never even practiced. As soon as something's riding on a match, you just, well, I do, play very differently. You play within yourself. It's not a good thing. I'd like to play more freely, and I think that only comes with playing more. You know, in surfing, they say you've got to spend more and more time in the water. It's the same thing in tennis or anything for that matter. You've got to spend more time on court. You've got to hit more balls. It's that 10,000 hour rule. You just got to hit, and hit again. So after the sort of serving practice, we decided to finish off by playing a first to 11. Steve ended up getting me, I think, like 12-10 or something like that. So we just hit the ball out of the hand and then points on, basically. Even playing an 11s match or like a little point structure, I find myself pulling back a little bit because you want to keep the ball in, you want to win the points, and it's hard, isn't it? Like you know what you're capable of doing, but it's that psychological component that changes everything. So I'd be interested to hear what other players think about this. You know, it doesn't matter what level you are. It's all relative. You know, I think whether you be a professional or just some sort of weekend warrior, we can probably all relate to different scenarios on court. You know, dealing with people who call poorly, and how that affects your mood. You know, not even to do with your opponent, but just yourself. You know, some of you may have businesses of your own, or careers that you've dedicated yourself to, and you know, all you want to do is have a few points during the week where you can go out and play the game that you love, but you get on court, things don't go your way, and you ask yourself, why am I doing this? You know, I want to play for enjoyment, but every time I go on court, I just hate it. You know, what can we do to get around this? From all the years of playing tournaments, I know what I need to do. Like, you've got to keep your cool and breathe deeply and acknowledge where you're at in your playing ability. You know, how much practice have you done? What else is going on in your life? They're not excuses, it's just acknowledging, look, you know, if you only practice 1 hour a week, you can't demand of yourself absolute perfection. Tennis is an easy game, but also a tough game. Anyone can hit a ball over the net, that's easy, but try and do it with the constraints of a match, and it becomes incredibly difficult. If you guys want to share your experiences, again, please comment below. It'd be nice to hear everybody's experiences. Thanks for putting up with me again, and please subscribe, and Wish you all well. Hope all your shots on court are winners. Subscribe to my channel.